Mística. Mística is a term that we borrow from the Brazilian landless workers movement, or the MST. Throw up an emoji or put something in the chat if you've ever heard of the MST, the landless workers movement. The MST is the biggest movement of the organized poor in the Western Hemisphere with 1.5 million members. Mística is a practice of capturing the spirit of the struggle, the lessons, hardships, feelings, and emotions of our struggle for human rights and liberation expressed through song, poetry, dance, chants, ritual, art, and theater. One of the most important aspects of Mística for us is how we use it to build the collective identity of the working class as a whole. The Mística we're going to watch tonight comes from a video that is very pertinent to tonight's topic of storytelling. And leaders from the United Workers in Maryland and the Nonviolent Medicaid Army attended the Doctors Against Genocide 1,000 White Coats on the Hill action during Genocide Prevention Month. And this is part of our struggle, working class internationalism, understanding something that Martin Luther King said: the bombs we drop overseas explode at home. As our military budget increases and money is put toward war, 800 people every day in this country are dying of poverty. The fight for our basic rights unites survival struggles of the poor and dispossessed in the US with the survival struggles of those threatened by war, genocide, and sanctions abroad. In this video, you'll see Miss Annette Blake of United Workers telling her story as a political act.
I'm Annette Blake, and I'm a leader with the United Workers in Maryland. We are a poor people's human rights organization. We are connected nationally with the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, a movement to end poverty, led by the poor and fighting for our human right to health. We stand here today with Doctors Against Genocide to speak out against the war on the poor and dispossessed at home and abroad. I became homeless trying to take care of my mother, who was suffering with 3 types of cancer. I was unable to work due to my mother's illness. My mother's medical bills were outrageous. Because her pension was $1 over the threshold, she couldn't get Medicaid. Her feeding bags cost $900 a day. No one should have to go through what my mother and my family went through, watching your mom die because you cannot afford to pay for the feeding bag that she needs. Losing your housing in order to keep your mother alive. Unfortunately, I'm not alone. In the richest country in the world, an average of 800 people die a day due to poverty. Nearly a third of people experiencing homelessness attributed to medical death. And we know that homelessness and housing instability leads to greater health issues and even death. For decades, social welfare programs have been continually cut, saying there's not enough money. Meanwhile, the military budget continues to grow. There's nothing new about this war on the poor, but it has become genocidal. Last year, Congress passed a big, beautiful bill for billionaires, cutting nearly $1 trillion to Medicaid and over $120 billion to SNAP over 10 years. At the same time, they enlarged the Pentagon budget to more than $1 trillion. Billions of dollars going to bomb homes, hospitals, schools, killing tens of thousands and displacing millions of other, mostly poor people in other parts of the world. When these funds could be used to meet the needs of humanity and promote our human rights to health. We got to transform this whole system that is killing us here and abroad. It's going to take organizing. It's going to take all of us, poor and working class people, coming together across issues, lines of division, national borders, to build the power needed to change the system. We are here today to speak out, to call on our elected officials, but also to build permanent connection, because this cannot be a moment. It must be a movement. Thank you.
Yeah, show some love for Miss Annette and United Workers, our sibling organization in the South, part of the Nonviolent Medicaid Army and the National Union of the Homeless. And with that, I will pass it to Jimmy from Indiana, who's going to take us through our goals and agenda.
Alrighty, y'all. Yeah, so our goals for tonight, we're going to begin by helping us practice turning our own experience into the plight, fight, insight framework, using our story as a political act, kind of like the video we just saw. We also want to help us feel more comfortable and confident speaking publicly into the media. And finally, also develop the clarity and skills to use the increasing media attention on Medicaid and healthcare in 2026. And for our agenda today, so we're already doing this goals and agenda review, but we'll proceed by discussing some of the historical and present day context of storytelling. Then we'll proceed to talk about the agitation within media work, talking about learning from these different kinds of interviews. Then we're going to practice our ABCs, which is acknowledge, bridge, and connect framework, and we'll get into what that is. Then we'll practice what we've learned up to that point in breakout rooms through writing and I imagine verbal practice as well. Then finally we'll debrief about everything and close with some next steps.
Hi, I'm Monica. I'll read our community agreements. First off, with the platinum rule. So treat others the way they want to be treated, not just the way you want to be treated. One mic, only one person should speak at a time. Assume positive intent and take care of impact. Not everyone comes in with the same set of experiences and knowledge, so assume that people have good intent. Also, be accountable for the impact of your actions and words as well. Move up, move back. If you feel you are speaking a lot, make space for others to speak. And if you find yourself not talking, try to contribute some comments, ideas, and suggestions. Respect each other's time. Please come back on time from breaks and refrain from speaking in long monologues. No one knows everything. Together, we know a lot. This agreement asks that we all practice being humble and look for what we have to learn from each other in the room. It asks us to share what we know, as well as our questions, so that others may learn from us. We are all responsible for the success of the space. In contrast to how we experience ruling class education as a product to be consumed, we believe that everyone has the ability to learn and to teach. We expect all members to take an active role in the success of the gathering. Everyone is valuable. Supporting each other and creating the conditions for each person to engage and contribute as fully as possible is an essential step toward creating the organization and building the power we need to change this system. We come from all different backgrounds and abilities, which is a strength. Pacing and visual descriptions. When facilitating a slide with images, please describe the image. Make a strong effort to speak slowly and clearly throughout. Participants, please speak up if you need a facilitator to speak louder or slow down. What one person needs, others also benefit from. All NVMA events are drug and alcohol-free or substance-free spaces. We respect the needs of members in recovery or who otherwise may not be able to be in the presence of drugs or alcohol. Members should not be intoxicated or using substances while participating in NVMA spaces, virtually, over Zoom, or in person.
Hi everyone. I'm Nico. I'm going to be taking us through the Who We Are slides. The Nonviolent Medicaid Army of the Poor is a growing, politically independent force of the poor and dispossessed, united across identities, regions, races, and issues, modeled after MLK's Nonviolent Army of the Poor from the Poor People's Campaign of 1968. And on this slide, we've got an image of Joy's Medicaid Monday from Pennsylvania. Those who are on or excluded from Medicaid represent the diversity of the entire working class and are impacted by every single front of struggle: housing, living wages, food, education, debt, migration, incarceration. The fight for Medicaid is common to the North and the South. And on this slide, we've got an image of Lamont from New York State, and his Medicaid Monday. And I will read it. My Medicaid story. I have several medical issues, including sickle cell anemia. I have to have iron treatments and bone marrow injections every other week. Without Medicaid, I would not get treatments and I could lose my life. Being on or excluded from Medicaid objectively unites a huge section of the leading social force, the group of people that has the most to gain and the least to lose from a fundamental transformation of society. And on this slide, we've got a Medicaid Monday from Melissa in Maryland, and it says hashtag mental health matters. Therapy is essential. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Nijme to ground us in telling our stories.
Thanks, Nico. Once again, this is Nijme. I'm here in Pennsylvania with Put People First PA. And if you're not seeing the slides, it might be what you have selected for just your visual. So there's different ways you could see it, like side by side, gallery. You could choose like the person speaking. So Scott, okay, good. I see you got them. Perfect. So I want to ground us a bit in the history of that we draw on when we think about storytelling, how we tell our stories as a political act. One of the periods that we study and draw on for strategic and tactical lessons and inspiration is the movement to end slavery, the abolitionist movement. Before the Civil War, abolitionists formed vigilance committees. On the slide, you can see a photograph on the left of one of these vigilance committees, as well as an announcement flyer on the right advertising a meeting with local abolitionist speakers. The vigilance committees provided material aid to fugitive enslaved Black workers and brought hundreds, if not thousands, of formerly enslaved people into leadership roles as writers, preachers, lecturers, militia organizers, and political leaders. So think about the committees that we have today in our movement, the healthcare rights committees, the organizing committees that form the backbone, the heart and soul, the home base of our movement, where people become politically connected and grounded. Back to the abolitionist movement. For many, the first step upon reaching free soil was to tell their story. Fugitive knowledge became abolitionist knowledge, which helped assist other fugitives and made possible their incisive, accurate critiques of the slave economy. Formerly enslaved people would go on lecture, tours, and speak at churches, town squares, meetings, schools, anywhere people would listen. Their stories shattered the myths put forward by the slave-holding ruling class of slavery as natural. What are the myths that we have to shatter today? What is being put forward before us as natural? What is being normalized and naturalized and made common sense by the powers that be that we know isn't right, isn't just, isn't moral, and is not the will of God? Part of what we're going to do today is to reflect on our experiences in preparation for telling our stories as a political act. As Kelly is going to be discussing next, we have a responsibility and a duty to break the media whiteout on the stories and experiences of the poor and dispossessed in this country today. There is very little in the media that people consume that actually does that, conveys not only the plight, but also the unite, fight, and insight of the organized poor. And we must be unapologetically organized. The tactics that we use in the Medicaid and SNAP organizing drives, like the healthcare story wall, Medicaid Mondays, speaking at actions and events, legislative story cards, are an ongoing representation of our movement, showing people that they're not alone, defining the fundamental problem and the solution, and inspiring people to get organized. And if we could just move to the next slide, which has a quote from Susan of the Wisconsin NVMA, and I want to invite somebody to come off of mute and read this quote, if you wouldn't mind.
I could do it.
Go for it.
It occurred to me that all the Medicaid Monday stories shared are a visual representation of the poor organizing permanently in many places across differences. Something we know is the way to bring about change of the whole system that cannot be easily undone by the ruling class. Just seeing the faces and stories of so many people speaking out about their experience, breaking their isolation, and recognizing this isn't their personal failure, but the failure of a system that's actually designed to make them fail, is in itself a powerful validation of our movement. Susan Anderson, Wisconsin, Nonviolent Medicaid Army.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you so much. So we can go to the next slide, please. We know that the media often wants the plight, or what we sometimes also can call, I sometimes call poverty porn, but not the unite, fight, and insight. In fact, their ratings and profit thrives off of constantly stoking the divisions in our class, obscuring the truth, and putting forward false solutions. That's why we practice both telling our story and engaging with the media in an effective way. And I will pass it on to Kelly.
Thank you so much, Nishmi. I really appreciate that. And we're just gonna, let's leave that last slide up there because I don't have slides. And so that will be perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name's Kelly. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in New York City and with the New York NVMA and a part of the media team as well, the NVMA media team. So before we kind of get into these like how-tos of media work, it's really important to understand why the NVMA emphasizes this so strongly. So it may seem obvious, there's probably some obvious reasons, but when folks put in the chat what some of the reasons that, why do you think we do media so strong? To tell our stories, to connect with others. Yeah, to shift the narrative, absolutely. And it's because it's essential. Yes, love these and more continuing to come in. These are all great reasons. And everything we do is also to develop leaders, right? So understanding the importance of our stories and being able to share those stories is a political act, as Nishmiya said. When we share our stories with the media or we post our Medicaid Mondays, it has now become a political act done in a public way. This is a strategic part of our development as leaders. And that political act done in a public way is even more important right now, and it is going to continue to be more important. Getting our voices out there is our responsibility. As Nishmi mentioned, there is literally a media whiteout on stories and experiences of the poor and dispossessed in this country from the point of view of the poor and dispossessed. Yeah, you occasionally, like, we probably all have seen things where some pundit or some so-called expert or maybe even some like nonprofit executive is kind of traipsed out to allegedly talk on our behalf. But these are not the voices that we need out there. They do not represent our interests. We have a message and a point of view and a clarity that people aren't hearing right now. The same old isn't working, right? We hear from the media kind of the same old stuff regurgitated out. And through our lived experiences and commitment to study, we provide an insight that isn't being talked about. And it's not about personality or who's the most eloquent or the most charismatic. People want to hear from folks who are like them, their neighbors, their friends, their family whose experiences resonate with theirs. And we are working to change the narrative by changing who has the microphone and who has the pen. We have to get our theory of change and our stories of plight, fight, and insight out there because we know that the ruling class absolutely has no answers on healthcare. And this is only going to get more important in the coming months as healthcare becomes one of the weapons candidates and parties wield against one another. We see these narratives being put out. I shared one just recently of something that the press picked up on and was put in several different publications that Stephen Miller said about like the abuse in Medicaid, the fraud in Medicaid. He was not speaking, first of all, the truth, but he was also not speaking for us, right? We have to change these narratives. But there's also going to be people with power and money who make demands and kind of appear maybe to be on our side. But we know that their words will be shallow. The band-aids and scraps they will propose as being for our benefit will likely never happen and ultimately will be nothing like the permanent transformative change that we are organizing and fighting for and that we deserve. So it is our responsibility, not just one of the things we do, to get our voices out there and to not let others speak for us or say they're speaking for us. Lastly, media work actually allows us to create resources that are helpful to us. So whether it's like a radio or television interview or an interview in an article or a podcast, these pieces are useful to us. They're useful for training and for political education, and yes, for our continued leadership development. You may have seen things like passed around in NVMA threads or put on our social media that we've been in. And, whether 10 people or a million people originally read these things or see these things or listens to these interviews, it's still a tool that we can use to develop us into a stronger movement. And by creating these excerpts and creating these resources, we can also continue to put the story out. So tonight we're going to get into this more, maybe the thought of media work, I worried when we put the title of this together, people were going to be like, "Ooh, that's not for me." That gives me like a pit in my stomach, or makes you feel like you're not the right person for this. But you are. You absolutely are. Each and every person on this call, your voice is needed. And I'm going to, with that, turn it over to Jamie.
Wow, Kelly, amen. That was beautiful. Just show some appreciation. That was so right on time. Thank you so much, Kelly. So I'm taking us. My name's Jamie. I'm with Put People First PA. I'm also part of the NVMA media team, along with Kelly, Nijmi, and Ilitha. And my next section is a bit vulnerable. I'm going to play some excerpts from an interview on New York WBAI, an outlet that NVMA has been featured on a few times, and largely because of a relationship developed by Kelly. And so, they've learned through getting to know her, through getting to know us, that we're a trusted source where they'll hear people's stories of what's going on the ground. So they come back, they give us more airtime. So back in September, Kelly Ilitha from United Workers and myself were interviewed on their program about our National NVMA Day of Action. So we're going to listen to this clip about midway through the interview. So we're kind of just jumping into it. And we're asking people to think about, I'll put it in the chat. How do you hear us lifting up our theory of change or key campaign demands? How do you hear us responding to curveballs and keeping it on our message? And then we'll have about 5 minutes for folks to share a few reflections afterwards. So feel free to drop things in the chat as you go, and then would love to hear some people and what you reflect on afterwards. And I do want to say, as I get ready to share my audio, that please give us grace and some appreciation. It is so awkward to listen to yourself, especially in a room full of, dozens of other people. Doing the interview itself is already awkward. And then you're like, well, now I got to hear all the ways that I wish I had done better. But I do, I feel really proud of us. And I know that every opportunity is just an opportunity that we are learning from, that we are growing, and that we are developing as leaders. So may it benefit our movement. And just give the thumbs up if you can hear this as I play it.
At stake. And Ilitha, I'm wondering if you could talk about the impact on people. And by impact on people, I mean for individuals who don't have healthcare or may be in danger of losing it, to be able to speak out and take the kind of actions you're all engaged in. Like, is there a shame factor that can keep people from coming forward, saying, yes, I too am on Medicaid? Or is this like a moment where people are feeling empowered?
Yeah, I would say that this is a moment where people are feeling empowered to share their stories, to share their testimonies. To a lot of the stories that we are hearing when we are organizing in the communities and also at the rally, people know that without Medicaid, it is a death sentence for them. A lot of our members rely on Medicaid in order to live. And so to have Medicaid cut is really policy violence. And to be able to tell our stories, it's an uplifting, powerful experience where we're able to unite across that struggle with each other. I would say that there was a mother who spoke on, losing Medicaid will mean not being able to afford an asthma pump. We have to breathe. And so those stories are it empowers us. There's no shame. There may be nervousness in sharing, but there is a power, it's a political thing to do to share our stories. And it really is what unites our class, and it's what starts movements.
Well, I'm also wondering, does any of this feel familiar to any of you? Meaning that, does this seem similar to the situation that we had leading up to the COVID pandemic? I'm not blaming the pandemic itself, the virus, on the lack of healthcare, but the lack of healthcare did seem to exacerbate the outcomes for millions of Americans. And that panel is to everybody, but actually, Jamie, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think that's really great to lift up. And I'll also connect the dots a bit to what Kelly was saying before. Before those, or rather, absolutely leading up to the pandemic and that fear and the uncertainty of what do we do? And we saw how, right, different folks, depending on if you could isolate, or if you had access to the care you needed, absolutely, that poor and working class families were hit the hardest by COVID. And then that we saw also this glimmer of hope when, as Kelly was mentioning, the pandemic era protections were put onto Medicaid, and folks didn't have to go through that re-enrollment, that searching for paperwork, that feeling scared if, oh, okay, my gig work, I've been paid a little bit more, and so now I'm going to be cut off of Medicaid. And when none of that was an issue and folks knew that we could just keep our consistent enrollment in Medicaid, we saw a glimmer of what was possible until, again, the omnibus bill passed 2022, 2023. Folks start left and right getting cut off of Medicaid.
Okay. Okay. And for, I guess, yeah, I mean, a similar question to, for example, Kelly. Do you see this as sort of similar to the situation we were in 2019 leading up to the pandemic and the, again, horrific outcomes that we saw during the pandemic?
Yeah, I do, in the sense that these are ongoing attacks, right, on healthcare. And one of the things I think we learned during the pandemic, and Jamie was touching on this, is it exposed the deep fissures in our society, in our country, between who has access to healthcare and who doesn't, who's getting what they need. And so I remember thinking, okay, people are talking about this, like they're recognizing that we have a crisis in this country that first impacts those that are poor and marginalized, but eventually impacts everyone. And maybe we're going to do something about it. And we did, as Jamie mentioned, we briefly sort of made it much easier to get on Medicaid for people to get the help they needed. And then we quickly rolled that back. I think we are going to be seeing similar things happen. This is not a new story. As I said, attacks on Medicaid have been happening for years. I think these hospital closures are going to be something that we see an increasing number of. We know that to be the case. It's going to affect rural areas. It's going to affect urban areas. And I think that is going to have a health outcome that is disastrous for people.
All right, that's our little excerpt. I'll put the link in the chat if you want to listen to the whole interview. So let's have a little appreciation for the three of us who were part of that, and also everyone else in here who either you've pushed yourself to be part of that uncomfortable media interview, or this is getting you ready to do just that, knowing that you, like all of us, will learn and grow so much through that opportunity. So we have, all right, just over 2 minutes, so maybe we can get a few comments here. What did y'all hear? What did you hear as far as our theory of change, our key demands, responding to curveballs, key parts of our messaging?
Can I just say it was fantastic?
Awesome. Thank you. And I see Nijmi put in the chat, the question about shame was a bit of a curveball, and y'all handled it really well. So shout out to Alita for that. And maybe we can take I'll remove the spotlight just while we're having the discussion.
Can you hear me?
I heard a reference to policy violence instead of just the folks like, oh, it's the unwinding, it's just back to normal. It was a real point that this is policy violence. Yeah, Zevi, go for it.
Yeah, I think this is a spoiler for what's coming up, but you didn't really have to spend much time answering their question, and you could kind of just take it and pivot to the points that you wanted to bring up. And I think you all did that really skillfully.
Yes, Alita is about to give us a little more practice with that skill set.
Could I say something?
Yeah, Taka.
I think y'all did a good job of kind of I think there's a way that the way that the reporter was talking about COVID, right, as this tragedy, which it certainly was and is. but there's a way that that kind of becomes depersonalized, and y'all did a good job of like kind of reshifting the blame onto like very specific actions taken by specific people without it becoming like an intense confrontation or like whatnot, but just kind of like, rather than kind of like allowing the conversation to edge into kind of like hearts, kind of like 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 prayers and kind of this like politically neutral territory kind of shifted back. Not that prayer is not important.
I so appreciate that. And I'll lift up what Nicole said too. Loved how you kept the message centered on our healthcare needs and that it's a systemic issue. Yeah, awesome. Thank y'all so much for your reflections. It was great to hear. And I will now pass it to Aletha.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Jamie, so much for walking us through that exercise. That was really it was really good to hear and great feedback too from everyone. So thanks for walking us through that. So as we heard in the clip that Jamie shared, sometimes a reporter will ask us questions that can throw us off and get us off track from our core message that we're trying to get across. And it might not necessarily be a totally bad question, or it might not necessarily be their intention to mess you up. But it can still get us to talking about something other than what we're really trying to get across. And sometimes these questions can shift the frame of what this story is really about, what our stories are really about. And sometimes reporters may look for certain buzzwords or a juicy soundbite. And so we really have a short time, a short window to get our message across. And so we want to be able to pivot effectively to stay on message. And that is easier said than done. I know in that clip I was very nervous. And so when you're in that situation, especially when there's a lot going on around you, or if you're nervous, you know, it's helpful to have a method that you can use to remind yourself on how to move off that question without necessarily being rude and ignoring it, but getting back to again, like the core message that we're trying to get across. And so we call that method ABCs, or ABC framework. And if you can go to the next slide, we'll talk about each one. So acknowledge, bridge, and control, and connect. And so acknowledge, we want to say something that shows that we heard the question, and that you are responding to it in some way. So, like, for example, they may ask something about a specific piece of healthcare reform that's moving throughout your state now, but you're trying to focus on the cutoffs in the bigger picture of healthcare. And so we want to find a way to say that, like, yeah, I acknowledge the question that you just asked me. And of course, addressing XYZ may be important, but we also believe, and then you would bridge it. And so the next slide. Bridge, yes. You say something that can help you move from their question to what you really want to say. So the real issue is here. You can say something like that. Or what I think, or what I'm really here to talk about today is, or that's a great point. That's why ... And actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because really, and then you go on to control, control the messaging, control the narrative. You want to control what you say in the interview by going back to repeating your key points. And remember that, again, they're trying to get these short bits of sound bites. So you can't let them record you repeating their talking points. You want to be constantly repeating your own talking points. And when you are in doubt, just keep repeating the points that feels the most clear to you. And then connecting that back. Because like Nijmi said earlier, they, sometimes or a lot of times, the focus is around the plight or just hearing the sad story. But we really want to make sure that we're including the fight and the insight and the unite pieces in there. And so with that being said, we're gonna do some breakouts where we'll get a chance to practice this. So for the next 20 minutes, we'll be in our small groups. And in our small groups, we'll have, after you do our brief introductions in our groups, we want to review the Plight Fight Insight worksheet that will help us think about how to structure our stories for the media. A copy of this was sent out prior for those who registered, but if you didn't get it or you didn't have time to look at it, that's fine. Hopefully you did, but if you did not, don't worry about it, because we'll spend the first 10 minutes or so in our breakout groups reviewing the worksheet and having time to work together to construct our stories if we haven't already came with the Medicaid Monday or speech that we've recently done. And then after we do that, we'll actually practice with some scenarios. So your group facilitator will act as a reporter, and we will practice with one another on how to answer questions that a reporter might throw at us. And then when our time together is up, we will come back together as a large group, and Jamie will lead us in a debrief. So yeah, so are we ready to break out into
your small group? If you learned something, if you tried a new thing doing that, I really appreciated my time with my small group. So we have 4 more minutes and would just love to hear some reflections. So again, folks are welcome to put it in the chat. Would also love people coming off mute. And our questions are very simple. There's, how was that? What was good about practicing? What did you learn? What questions do you have? So would love to hear some. Yeah, hi Joy. How was it for you?
Oh, good. And I got also good news. My one of my people that I did a follow-up with has a really, really, really good story on about her not having like Medicaid insurance and then what her hospital bill ended up being. So I'm going to share it with Harrison tonight and get her story on one of our cards for the June 8th.
Thank you so much, Joy. So crucial that we keep telling our stories, that we base build and we keep leading with these powerful stories. Thank you for sharing that victory. What about other folks? Yeah, Trenton, go for it. And then I see Helen, I think, did you put your hand up? Yeah, so Trenton and then Helen.
Yeah, Aaron and Nadia handled the reporter interviewee role play part of things. But what I noticed in Nadia's question was a very partisan framing of the question about attacks on healthcare, because she kind of made the Democrats the good guys and the Republicans and the Trump administration the bad guys. And they're definitely the bad guys, but what we have to remember is it was Biden and the Democrats who were in charge, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and all them, who unwound all the buildup on Medicaid during that unwinding from the end of the pandemic. So
exactly,
watching out for those partisan setups and those little trick questions or trap questions is something we have to be aware of. I don't think reporters are doing that on purpose. Maybe some of them are, but they cater to billionaires and their media machine. So
That's right.
we
Yeah,
got to remember that we need to bring the focus down to the bottom
exactly.
level.
Yes. Thank you so much, Trenton. We are politically independent. We know politicians are not coming to save us. So let's hear from Helen just briefly. These are more like 30 seconds and then over to Kelly.
Well, I think it's great to be taken off guard and practice on a question and just be thrown into it. And that's something that was good for me because that's something I needed. Just ask me a question and I got to think fast on my feet. You know what I mean? And then say it appropriately too. You know what I mean? And don't swear, things like that. That's good. That's what practicing being on your feet quick.
Yes.
I like it.
That one of our elders, Willie Baptist, often quotes, I think Mike Tyson, that's like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's how it can feel when you're getting these interview questions and you're like, what the what? Acknowledge bridge control.
My back is broken.
Let's hear. I know we have to move. Kelly, do you want to get in here briefly and then we'll go to the close?
Yeah, sorry, I know I've already talked today too, but I just wanted to reinforce like what Trenton was saying. And I know maybe not every group got to all the scenarios and things, but yeah, they will ask us. I mean, I'm no media expert, but just in the number of interviews I've done, they friendly outlets will try to ask us these questions that get us to like blame one or the other. And yeah, it's so important to kind of just be prepared for that. And second, like really emphasize y'all don't have to know all the answers to things. I know we say that, but it just should be said over and over and over. If they ask you like, well, what do you think about this piece of legislation that's blah blah, and it's like, I haven't, that's not my job. So here's what I'm here for. So yeah, just wanted to throw that out.
I love that. That is such an important point, Kelly. That's not what you're here for. Who cares if that's what you ask, if they ask that you're going to acknowledge it, but you are going to get to what you came there for. And we have time for just one really quick comment from Jeanette.
Okay, I just like doing this because it motivates me to be a motivated speaker, to be out there in front of people, not being shy or stutter when I'm talking. And this practice helps a lot. So I do enjoy doing this. Thank you.
Yes. And I heard someone, Mr. Love put in the chat, practice makes perfect. I love that. All right. Thank y'all so much for those reflections, and I will pass it to Joe.
Thanks, everybody. This has been an amazing call. I am so hyped and inspired to see over 50 people on this call. Listen, some of us have experience doing this, talking to press, giving interviews. Some of us are brand new, and I just want to encourage you all. Everybody started and was brand new at one point, right? It takes practice. It takes discipline. It takes organization. I hope hearing from your friends across the country, as we did in our small group, practice this, that you're taking away really powerful lessons from this. Look, the dominant media and the people in power, they don't care what we think. We have to force them to listen to us. And we do that through our organization. We do that through training and skill building and discipline. And that's what we're doing here. So please take these tools with you, practice them in your local regional committees, talk to other folks about this, practice. It doesn't need to take a lot of time, right? Like we just had 25 minutes in a small group, right? Like you can do this in a meeting, work through the plight, fight, and insight, unite and insight forum, and practice with one another. So I want to encourage everyone to do that. Super awesome to see everybody here. All right, you can put up the very last slide. I'm going to talk really briefly about a couple upcoming things, and we'll close with a chant. All right. The next Saturday School of Struggle is coming up June 6th. Why do we demand Medicaid for all? Maybe you've heard other healthcare organizations talking about Medicare for all, but we have a very particular and specific frame and analysis that leads us to organize around Medicaid. And this Saturday School coming up is going to be a great place to learn about that and really deepen our understanding about why we do that. Our next national call is on the fourth Thursday, June 25th. And we'll be talking about what's called earned media, right? So today we were talking about practicing, when you get the opportunity to give an interview, but there's actually a whole skill set around setting up and being able to arrange those interviews and making sure that press comes to our events, right? And arranging those kinds of things. And that is actually its own skill set that we need practice in and some skill building to develop. So we'll be talking about that there and talk about some experiences and how we've gotten media attention in that sense. As always, folks can share your story with Medicaid Mondays. I hope in the course of filling out that form, maybe you didn't feel like you had a healthcare story to tell before, but in the course of filling that out, you have found, oh, in fact, you do. You can go to the website, nonviolentmedicaidarmy.org. There's the extended link there. That'll be dropped in the chat. I think one of our tech folks will do that. But you can find that link really quickly on the website. Also, we know that the SNAP work requirements, which are a prelude to the Medicaid work requirements that are going to be coming next year, right? They're very similar dynamics and setups, and our organizing drives around the Medicaid cutoffs and the SNAP cutoffs all contribute towards building the organization of our class. Not only are we trying to meet immediate needs, help people keep the benefits that they are entitled to, but we are organizing through that process, bringing folks together, showing people, demonstrating that they are not alone. So if you want a little bit more info on that, you can go through that link. If you need help, especially if you're maybe you're getting kicked off of SNAP or you've gotten one of those notices. And lastly, we've got social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Check them out. Share this stuff. The recording from this call will be up on YouTube, usually within a week or so. And so once that's up, we'll send that out to everybody. And please share it. Again, great opportunity to practice with the folks you're organizing with locally. With that, if you can drop the screen share, we're going to close with our chant. And I'm going to invite everybody to come off mute, and we can remove the spotlight too so that we can see everybody. I'm going to say, "Who are we?" And you're going to shout back in a delightful, beautiful cacophony, the Medicaid Army. All right. Who are we?
The Medicaid Army.
Who are we?
The Medicaid Army.
Fantastic. Thank you to our tech folks. Thank you to the small group facilitators. Thank you to our media team who